Okay guys, good morning or afternoon depending on when you're watching this. So what I want to do today is I'm going to do a bit more work on trade unions, and then we're going to move on to one more topic, do some workbook chapters, do some exam style questions as well. And yeah, that's what we're going to do this afternoon or morning depending on when you're doing this. Okay, so first activity, first thing I want you to think about is discuss, are trade unions good for your country's economy? Okay, so are trade unions a positive thing or a negative thing or a bit of both, and what are the reasons for that on a economy? So just pause the video, have a little think back to trade unions. What are the positives and negatives from the point of view of an entire economy? Okay. So we're still looking at trade unions, the aims and purposes of them, and evaluate if a worker is better off in a trade union or not, and we're going to do that through an exam question a little later. So some positives and negatives that you should have thought of. So from the point of view of being in a trade union from the country's perspective, well, the positives are that people are going to have higher wages, or probably going to have higher wages because the trade union is going to fight and negotiate higher wages through collective bargaining and the threat of strikes and go slows and contract following, and some of the things you should have looked at when you made your leaflet. We should have less exploitation of workers, which is good for the economy, it's good for the country to have happy, motivated workers, and therefore we're going to get more output because workers are paid well, they're motivated, they're happy, and they're working hard. Okay? But on the other hand, we've got higher costs. It's going to interfere with the labour market forces. Remember when we spoke about the labour market, which is just the demand of labour, derived demand, and the supply of labour from society, from people, the population. And any kind of interference with that prevents supply and demand from interacting in the best way, like using the free market. So if a trade union steps in and pushes up wages above equilibrium, then that should create a surplus of workers and actually create unemployment. Whether that happens or not, we can negotiate, we can discuss, but that could be one effect, that as the trade union interferes with the market can no longer operate in a free way, which is not good. If a strike is called, then that's wasted potential. That means we're operating within the PPF curve, and that's a waste of potential because people are striking rather than working. And if the trade union negotiates wages higher than wages in other countries, that's going to raise costs of production and perhaps make firms less competitive abroad because they've got to pay so much in wages. Okay, so that's kind of a quick eval, a quick AO3, AO4 of trade unions and the balance on the country. Okay, so what I want to get into now, and these are on the sheet that I want you to open up today. You can copy that straight into your workbook. Are these three questions here? These three multiple choice questions. So if you go to the workbook, got trade union questions, have a go at answering these three trade union questions, multiple choice questions, and then these questions here. Okay, so using this information about Turkey, explain to function of trade unions, and look, that's 4 marks, so you're going to need to point, explain, identify the measures trade unions can take to improve working conditions. That's identify, so that can just be a list. And then we've got this assess whether Turkish workers should join a trade union. So we need 1 paragraph with 2 points and 2 logical chains of why they should, and then a second paragraph of 2 logical chains of why they shouldn't. Okay, so all in all, that should take you about 12, 16, 19, I'd give yourself about 30, 35 minutes for this at the most. Okay, maybe 25, 30 minutes in fact. Okay, so pause the video and we'll talk about the answers shortly. Okay, so hopefully you've done those questions now. So you've done the 3 multiple choice and the 3 written questions. So let's have a look at multiple choice then. So a group of workers in a trade union a firm join a trade union. What should the union be expected to do? Discuss safety issues in the workplace with the employer. So again, representing workers and their interests. What is a function of a trade union? Well, to negotiate workers' contracts. That's the main function. And a trade union is negotiating a wage rise for its members. What's going to increase the likelihood of getting that wage rise? Well, if the wages are a small part of the company's costs. Okay, so BAD. So the written questions then. So using the extract, explain two functions. Well, collective bargaining, protecting rights or negotiating to improve wages and or working conditions. Taking industrial actions such as strikes, which are mentioned in the case study, in the pursuit of higher wages and or better working conditions, or to influence government policy, perhaps on something like a minimum wage. So any two sets of those. So one on one, one on one. Okay, so identify four measures a trade union can take. Well, they can take strike action, so call a strike or walk out, collective bargaining or negotiating on the workers' behalf, contract following, which means that the workers are told to follow their contract to the letter. So if it says take an hour for lunch, you take your full hour and you don't do any work. If you're contracted 9 till 5, you get in at 9 and you leave at 5. So you're not breaking your contract, but you're following it to the letter. No overtime, no additional work. You take all your breaks, you work to the letter of your contract. Or a go slow, where it's very similar to a contract following, but you deliberately work slow, work inefficiently, reduce output in order to put pressure on the business to negotiate better with the trade union. Okay, so they're the four main measures. So assess whether Turkish workers should join a trade union. So again, we wanted 2 paragraphs with 2 points and 2 logical chains. So yes, they campaign and negotiate better wages for members. This would give them greater disposable income and therefore higher standards of living. They also negotiate better working conditions such as working hours, sick pay, holidays and breaks. Without trade union membership, workers may be exploited and treated poorly by businesses. Or on the other hand, it doesn't have to be exactly like this, but this is the kind of points that we're looking for. No, the trade union membership in Turkey have very little power due to the restrictive laws and very low membership of 9%. This puts them in a weak negotiating position and could lead to the 9% of workers that are in unions being treated less favorably. The money spent on paying to become a member creates an opportunity cost, and that opportunity cost is greater if the union fails to deliver any better pay or better working conditions. So basically, the money that you could have spent on something else is being spent on trade union membership, and that's particularly bad if the trade union cannot gain any favorable negotiations because the trade union membership is so low. Okay, so there doesn't have to be these exact answers, but good answers would use points like this. Okay, so that's the end of that section. So moving ahead, so now we're going to do some new work. So we're going to talk about specialization, the division of labor, and the advantage and disadvantage of division of labor. If you've done business studies, this should be a topic that you are familiar with. It's one of the early topics that you do in Unit 1 business. If it's not, we'll go through it now. So specialization, very simple definition. All it means is that when a person or a worker, a business, a region, or a country concentrates on the production of a specific good or service. Okay, so I'm a specialist because I'm an economics and business teacher. So a specialization is present in this school in that all the different teachers have different specialist subjects. A business can specialize in a small range of products. So, example, Apple specialize in technology products. Okay, a region might be famous for producing a certain product. So Champagne in France is obviously famous for producing champagne, sparkling wine, and no other country can call their sparkling wines champagne because they've specialized and it has to come from there to be called champagne. So that's a region specializing on a specific good, or maybe an entire country perhaps specializes on a specific good or service. So Hong Kong is quite specialized in finance. Okay, the financial industry, banking, investments is quite a specialist area of the Hong Kong economy and a major area. So we could say that Hong Kong specializes in banking and finance. Okay. The division of labor is an extension of specialization or goes along with it quite frequently. So this is basically when the production process is broken down into many separate tasks. Okay, so that raises productivity because each person becomes a specialist to become proficient or an expert in that area because they're constantly repeating that task. Okay, so for example, a this could be an example of division of labour, where you've got one person that frames pictures, one person that does the siding, one person that does the painting, one person that inspects for quality, and then one person in charge of shipping. Okay, so that's the division of labour. So going back to the worksheet there, so you should now be able to work through this. So read this. This is an extract from The Wealth of Nations. Basically, Adam Smith, probably the most famous economist ever, definitely the first economist ever, and probably one of the most famous books, called An Inquiry into the Wealth of Nations from 1776, probably the first economics book and the first economist, first spoke about the division of labour all the way back in the 18th century. Okay, because this is 250, 300 years old, the language that he uses obviously is quite difficult to understand, but have a read from this extract from The Wealth of Nations and answer these two starter questions. So how many pins could one worker make before and after the division of labour, and what happened to productivity in the pin industry? So have a read through, and then I'll try and just clarify a little bit in a minute. Okay, so you probably found that quite difficult to understand. All he's saying basically is that if you've got a factory producing pins and you set each person to create one pin, you gave them the iron and said make a pin, then maybe they would make 20 in a day. Perhaps some might not even make one. Okay, because it's quite difficult. You've got to do every single skill, every single task you're in charge of. So you're not going to be very good. You're not going to be specialized. You're not using the division of labor. Okay, but what he's saying is that if you use the division of labor, so you had one person who draws out the wire, one person that straightens it, another person that cuts it, another person that grinds the point, and another person that puts the top on it, then your efficiency and productivity would increase, and you could make up to 4,800 pins per worker per day. Okay, so there's a huge increase in the productivity in the pin factory if you use the division of labor, so splitting the production of a pin into distinct, clear activities. Okay, so we've already talked about the definition. I want you to read these advantages and disadvantages and identify, are they an advantage or a disadvantage? Just put a mark in. And then the final thing for today, well, let's have a look at these quick. So demotivated, so pause the video, work through this table. Okay, so let's have a look at the answers then. So demotivated workers due to repetitive tasks that can cause monotony and boredom. That is obviously a disadvantage because you're doing the same thing again and again. You're drawing out the wire, or you're putting the wheels on a car, or you're just doing the same thing day in, day out. So you're going to get bored because of the monotony. Workers spend time doing the same tasks, so become highly skilled and productive. That's obviously good. No time is wasted between moving jobs. That's obviously good. If one group of workers is unproductive or slow, then the entire production, we end up with like bottlenecks. So if one part of the division of labor suddenly slows down or fails, then the whole production process fails. Workers can specialize, higher productivity. Less time and resources are required to train workers. Advantage because you're only training them to do one specific thing. Staff turnover is maybe higher. Dividing production into smaller tasks. This may lead to structural unemployment. So people could eventually get replaced by machines if the activity is so simple. Okay, so have a look through them. Make sure you've got them all correct. And then the final bit for today is to have a look at these two questions. So specialization can lead to an increase in output and international trade. What is meant by specialization for 4 marks? Okay, so we're going to need a detailed explanation, definition, expansion, possibly an example, and then a further expansion on that. Okay, and then another 8 marker, similar to what we did in the first period today, discuss whether a region will always benefit from specialization. Obviously, we are going to need 2 points and logical chains on why a region might benefit. And again, we're going to try and use those logical chains using these sentence starters. And then 2 points and 2 logical chains on why it might not benefit. Okay? So I'll put a brief mark scheme up for this, and you can check your work once you have finished it. But that's it for today. So not much workbook, a little bit of workbook, but really doing more exam questions, more exam technique, getting us more confident as we're getting quite far into year 10 now. Okay? So I'll be online. Any questions, drop a comment, drop an email, or there'll probably be a Google Meet where you can ask anything specific. Okay? Right, thank you.